Okay, let's talk about how much the Spider-Man movies changed the comics to create them their movies, alright? Alright, let's do that. I'm Michael Keaton, and this is basically everything they changed about the Spider-Man villains. Who are they? You know. Oh, Norman Osborn, you trailblazer, you. 2002 Spider-Man ushered in the first really colorful villain of the modern superhero resurgence, but the world just wasn't ready for this guy or whatever the animatronic hell this is. Nah, instead of amalgamated dynamics, nightmarish interpretation of the comic book mask, or that sexy purple tunic, it was decided to go with this Power Rangers-looking some gun. And when it came time to bring in the Harry Osborn version of the character, well, they just doubled down on that aesthetic. As for Norman Osborn's death, that is incredibly accurate to the comics, at least as far as the means of the death. In the comics, this inconvenient impalement comes after Goblin tosses Gwen Stacy off the George Washington Bridge. Okay, technically that looks more like the Brooklyn Bridge, but, you know, whatever. Comics. Of course, this is later depicted in Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Goober Goblin here.
I need the Goober.
In the Sam Raimi version, Gwen Stacy isn't part of the story, so instead of her death, Green Goblin forces Spidey to choose between Mary Jane and this to-go box of plot devices. In Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, things got a little bit more comic book accurate. Our villain, Doc Ock, looks more or less just like his literary inspiration, minus the sexy skin-tight bright green and yellow jumpsuit, which, frankly, when you have Alfred Molina in the role, just go all out. Dude makes that bowl cut look good. Anyway, the only real major deviation is the addition of artificial intelligence, which isn't what drives Octavius to crime in the comics. He's just kind of a dick. In the movie, the fried chip gives the ARM's AI control of Otto, essentially giving him a split personality. This also helps make him more likable, along with the loss of his wife, Rosalie. Rosalie? I feel like it's Rosalie. Later in the comics, he would also try to marry Aunt May, which, actually, Alfred Molina hooking up with Marissa Tomei, I can get behind that.
I love it.
Oh, also, he doesn't have the relationship with Peter in the comics. That was also added. Again, it's just a lot of stuff to make him more likable. That's really the big difference. One of our biggest divergences in the Spidey canon has to do with Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, who of course in the comics is an incredibly unlikable, crotchety old man, not unlike me, and in Spider-Man Homecoming is Michael Keaton. To make things even more different, his suit in the comics is a little bit more stripped down and vulture-y, a homemade suit using an electromagnetic harness, which he developed using his skills as an electrical engineer. Now in the film, of course, he uses old Chitauri technology and I think dark elf technology, and I think they were also using other technology, bunch of alien technology. See, they're vultures. Get it? Because they're picking up the scraps. He's a vulture. Anyway, it's a bunch of technology that he managed to steal after being kicked off the New York cleanup gig by those jerks down in Damage Control, along with a big mechanical glider thingamabob. Additionally, while Toomes does have children in the comics, neither of them is Liz Allan, who is a notable girlfriend and classmate of Peter's in the comics. Fun side note, this dude is meant to be the Tinkerer, a B-list villain who also debuted, B-list might be strong for the Tinkerer, I'm not gonna lie here, it doesn't matter, who also debuted along with the Vulture in Amazing Spider-Man #2, and who was also changed from a cantankerous old man, forcing me to ask, hey Sony, what do you have against evil octogenarians, huh? That's discrimination, that's not cool, we live in 2022, man. 2021. I am old, Jesus Christ. In Far From Home, we were given a shockingly accurate suit for Jake Gyllenhaal's take on Mysterio. It's not an exact one-to-one, of course, but close enough for government work. Yeah, it's got armor where there was previously just that weird green mesh skin-tight suit, but again, closer than the majority of comic book to big screen adaptations. Of course, in the comics, he's not a former Tony Stark employee, and he's not using holographic technology mixed with a motion capture suit, nor does he ever use a drone army as far as I can recall. But hey, suit's pretty accurate. And honestly, his powers are essentially they're the same, it's just the means are a little bit different, which is in keeping with a lot of these adaptations. Anyway, in the best Spider-Man film to date, Into the Spider-Verse, we are not arguing about this, we get a whole bunch of villains. I'm not going to dig into all of them in minute detail, since by the very nature of the alternate world we're given, there's just a lot of innate little changes based on various iterations in the comics, like Olivia Octavius being a variation of Carolyn Traynor, Which, by the way, I love that her octopus arms are like inflatable. I think that's a really cool detail. Anyway, Green Goblin being a tad evolved, and the Prowler going from, well, a prowler to the living embodiment of my nightmares. Now that said, they're all relatively accurate, and the same goes for our big bad Kingpin, who is definitely a big bad. Obviously, his size is a stylistic choice. In the comics, he's certainly larger than average, but like, damn, son, he's a big daddy. He's also just more physically intimidating. In the comics, Wilson Fisk is certainly strong. Notably, he is often mistaken for being just some fat dude, when in reality he has undergone a tremendous amount of physical training throughout his life, meaning he can take just about any non-superhuman in a fight. This version, however, straight up just kills Spider-Man with his bare mitts, so obviously a bit of an upgrade in this iteration.
Get rid of the body.
Okay, time for me to lose what little credibility I have. I love the Amazing Spider-Man 2 version of Electro. His weird eel-based origin, his Dr. Manhattan moment sans Wang, his slick containment suit, his odd Riddler-esque obsession with Spider-Man, his freaking dubstep powers, the fact that he's a real-life blue meanie, like, I love him so much. The rest of the movie kind of blows, but Electro, can't get enough.
Don't you know? I'm Electro.
Of course, none of that's in the comics, wherein Max Dillon is just some electrical lineman who's struck by lightning while holding onto a power line, thereby giving him electrical powers, cause comics. Oh hey, remember Shocker in Spider-Man Homecoming? No? Well, yeah, he's not really much more than a glorified henchman in that film. Well, two henchmen, one of whom is vaporized by Batman in one of the more laugh-out-loud moments from the movie.
I thought this was the anti-gravity gun.
What? No, that's that one.
Our two Shockers are Jackson Bryce and Herman Schultz, the latter of whom was the Shocker in the comics. Bryce, meanwhile, was a founding member of the Spidey villains team, the Enforcers, and was only ever the Shocker in a few episodes of The Spectacular Spider-Man, aka the best Spider-Man cartoon ever. Come at me, fellow 90s kids. Bring it. Anyway, Shocker in the comics looks like this, and our Shockers in Homecoming look like this.
What's with the crappy costume?
A little entertaining homage, but still in that realm of trying to not look too silly, which in the case of Shocker, you know, fair enough. Dude looks like a Technicolor gimp.
Calling yourself the Shocker. I'm the Shocker. I shock people. What is this, pro wrestling?
We're not really given much backstory for this version of Herman Schultz, but as with Vulture, his tech is based on Chitauri leftovers, and of course, unlike in the comics, he inherits them from his post-weight loss predecessor.
Now you're the Shocker.
Back to the Raimi-verse, we gotta mention Sandman, and specifically his relation to Uncle Ben. What's pretty wild here is that Sandman's origin power set, even the way he just makes green horizontal stripes work for him, is all very much loyal to the comics, minus the sick daughter subplot, which was added to make him more sympathetic. Again, that's a thing with these movies. However, the biggest difference is that in the comics, Flint Marko has no involvement in the death of Uncle Ben. In Spider-Man 3, well, he's the one holding the gun on Uncle Ben, and his accomplice taps his shoulder, and the gun goes off. Man, that was lame. Moving on. As long as we're on the topic of Spider-Man 3, we gotta talk Venom.
Hey, Parker.
Of course, he would go on to have a totally spider-free origin in the Sony Venom series, but within his one Spider-Man appearance, so far at least, there's definitely some slight changes, including simplifying the introduction of the symbiote to Peter Parker, who doesn't have to go through a whole massive space adventure and instead just kinda gets lucky thanks to a rando meteorite. A lot of Eddie's origin here is technically accurate as far as his working as a journalist and getting fired, being taken over by the symbiote in a church. That's all well and good. The casting of Topher Grace, meanwhile, and the general design of Venom in Spidey 3 is where things go off the rails a little bit. Topher Grace makes for a pretty good Brock, but in the comics, Eddie is shown to be a bodybuilder in order to kind of cope with his issues in life, notably getting fired. Dude looks like he's smuggling possums under his skin. In the film, he's basically just some guy, and when the symbiote takes over, he just looks like Spider-Man, but with Amy Smart's mouth and mirrors. Of course, we can't talk about disappointing villain designs without digging up Harry Osborn's Green Goblin from Amazing Spider-Man 2, a decision that seemingly looked at the Raimi version and said, let's go the opposite direction, but keep the complete lack of respect for the source material. Now, to be totally fair, this version of Goblin does try for a more body horror interpretation, which is a cool idea, and some of the deleted scenes are, horrifying. Unfortunately, he just kinda looks fine, I guess. Maybe it would work if his origin wasn't super rushed or based around Peter's blood, which is, again, made up for the film. I guess it's all made up because it's all fiction, but you guys get it. Y'all are smart. Also in Amazing Spider-Man Part 2, we get a few minutes of Rhino, who is really just a sillier version of his comic book counterpart, except with a big ol' mech suit instead of these Rhino jammies. He also has super strength without the suit in the comics, which he got from that old standby, gamma radiation, baby. Finally, I gotta mention old Doc Connors from Amazing Spider-Man. Hashtag justice for Dylan Baker, by the way. His plans and even origin are changed slightly. In the film, he's a former colleague of Peter's father, who helped him develop the formula which would eventually turn him into the Lizard. In both the comic and the film, he does have one arm, and the purpose of taking the formula is to grow back that arm, and of course he gets turned into the Lizard, blah, 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 blah. That part's the same. Now, while Kirk Connor's reptilian persona has seen many variations in the comics, his look in TASM is certainly not based on any of the popular ones, which involve a snout and not whatever Super Mario nonsense this is.
Walk tall, be proud, go Goomba!
Seriously though, Spectacular Spider-Man, super rad. And it included a lot of changes to Spidey's Rogues Gallery, to the point it'd be pretty cool if my boss could assign that video to me, hint hint, nudge nudge. I'm not saying that I'm begging for that assignment just to rewatch the show, but like, it'd be pretty cool. Please?
Say my name and I magically appear.